All right, this is Chris Ott, and I'm continuing with this series, the What Mayor Baba Really Taught, and this is part 11. Today I'm going to be talking about a failed attempt to solve this mind-body problem that I talked about in part 5. So if you need to, um, go back to part 5 and refresh your memory about the description I gave of this problem. It included the story of the Parisian cafe where I go in and everything I taste and smell when I have a pastry. In fact, the entire experience of the pastry, because it's all these sensations, is um, internal. It's my subjective experience. Um, it's not like a thing. Like the smell that I experience isn't like something I can put in a jar. It's something that sort of somehow happens in my mind when I'm eating supposedly a a pastry. And then this creates the question: well, what about the real pastry? There must be also an unsubjective, objective pastry. Well, of course, I can't perceive it because I only perceive my own perceptions. So um, it becomes this sort of odd bugaboo in philosophy, um, which has come to be called a whole lot of things, but one of them is the external world. That's the world outside of your experience. So you obviously can't observe it. So it's not a scientific thing. It's just a hypothesis that it exists, but it can't be proved, even in principle, because in principle, if it existed, it would be something outside of everybody's experience, because everybody only has experience of their own subjective experience. All right. Well, anyway, go back to 5. You'll see. It's pretty clear. I rewatched it today, and it's better than I remember it being. So it gets it across. Now that's only talking about sensations like smell and taste and touch and those things. Those are all um, supposedly occur somehow in your brain, from firing and stuff. The theory of modern neurology holds. But then that says nothing of things like thoughts, emotions, memories, dreams. All those are also, of course, subjective and supposedly happening inside the physical brain, somehow being created in there because of electrical activity, so on. So everything, my entire world, is in me. So what about the world outside of me? And that's called the external world. So there have been many attempts to try to deal with this. And initially, it was mostly just sort of passed under the rug because of some statements by Aristotle, which were accepted through the Middle Ages. But in the beginning of the Renaissance, people started to question look at this problem again, and take it more seriously because Aristotle wasn't holding up very well anymore. And these people were considered, well, in their day, they were modern, and it's called modern philosophy. And we're going to talk about one of the attempts to deal with this problem of that external world, which was inexplicable. So it's by a very famous philosopher from the Enlightenment named George Berkeley, who was born in the late 17th century. And when he was teaching, he was 25 years old. He was teaching at Trinity College in Dublin, and he wrote this um, essay. Well, really, it's published as a book, but it's not long. It's called A Treatise Concerning the Principles of Human Knowledge, in which he laid out a theory which has caused people a lot of some were inspired by it, others were very irritated and thought it was ridiculous, and it was controversial. That's why we still have it. And it was written in 1710. Now, before I explain his solution to the mind-body problem, let me say where things were at the time. Before this treatise was written, um, Berkeley had been exposed to an English writer, very famous, John Locke, who had a lot to do with forming the ideas that later were used in the American Constitution and so forth. He was a very important political philosopher, but he was also understood metaphysics very well, and he was very good at articulating the sort of received view of the day. So we get a real good, clear picture from him of the mind-body problem at the time, which is late 1600s. And this had, as I just said, this had a lot of influence on Berkeley's thinking. Okay. Um, Locke wrote, first of all, when Locke uses the word qualities, see, the meanings of words changes in history, so it's very important when you read historical treatises like this that you understand how words are being used. When I was talking about the Parisian cafe, I said, sensations like smell and taste and touch and sound and so forth. But back then they called those qualities. So, like, how did it smell is a quality of the um, pastry, and how it looks, the color, that's a quality of the pastry. These are qualities. So, but however, what are they qualities of? Because that would be the external object, wouldn't it? Well, we can't perceive it. So he referred to that as the substance of the cake, okay? So you have the qualities, and how do they connect to the substance of the cake? Since we can't see the substance of the cake. Well, this is what he's talking about. So listen carefully. Locke wrote that the objects, like the piece of cake, were nothing more. No, the substance of the cake was nothing more than an unknown support of the qualities. Okay, so like these qualities had to be qualities of something, sort of sticking to something somehow, but I weren't sure. To which we give the general name substance, being nothing but the supposed but unknown support of those qualities we find existing, like smell, taste, touch, of the pastry, and which we imagine can't exist without something to support them. Okay? But then he says, when we go to think about this support, which he called the substratum of life, which is the same his word for the external world we can't perceive. There's some substratum, some support for the qualities. When we think about it, we have as poor a grasp of the idea of bodily substance as we have of spiritual substance or spirit. So there you have it. People might say, well, I don't really believe in God. That's spirit. I don't believe in that. But he says, well, we don't have any more concept for what, matter is, because that would be something that we can't perceive. So it's just theoretical, and we don't even have an idea about it. We just have a word. As I said, it was just sort of a nominal, in this case, sort of support for the qualities, or the unseen cause of your perception. All right? I hope that's clear. Now, Berkeley began to think about this. This writing by Locke was written in English. Berkeley was in Ireland, and he read it, and as everybody did, and philosophers did, people studying. He had just finished a degree there in Ireland. He was a young man, and he thought, well, if this is so mysterious, this matter, this the substance of an object, maybe it's just the qualities, okay? And maybe we don't need that, okay? So he looked for a system that could explain things without matter. And Berkeley called himself an immaterialist, his philosophy. It's immaterialism because he has a theory of how the world exists, where you have mental qualities like smell and taste and so forth of a thing, but no material substratum. So Berkeley hypothesizes that all these qualities, these sensations, are ideas in our mind. Which said that earlier, that's how that would have been expressed. Today we would say, they're somehow supervening upon electrical states in our brain, but we're not quite sure. But we would have to say they're in our brain, even though we can't find them in our brain. We would go, well, there's some kind of epiphenomenon of something else going on. We're not sure. So we're in the same place of not knowing how to explain all this. Except the thing that's common too is that it's in us, all right, literally. He goes, these are ideas in the mind, because since smell, let's say, is a sensation, so it's an idea, it's mental. So an idea can only be in a mind, where you can't have an idea in a shoebox, it has to be in a mind. So he thought, well, the origin of these, he decided, was that there was we all have our imperfect minds with our ideas. And when I hold an apple, what I really mean by the apple is those qualities, like the red, the feeling, the texture, the fragrance, the taste, and that is the apple. And that's in my mind. However, it originates in a greater mind, and that's the mind of God. So the world really is created by God as ideas in the mind of God. That's a beautiful thing to say, but it's similar to what Baba says in some ways, except Berkeley has, if you go back to the previous video, I described how Christians perceive the world here, God here, and then us here. Everything is divided. It's like a pluralism. God is part of that pluralism. And Berkeley saw things like that too. So it was like God dreamed up the world, but he never created it materially, because why would he bother? It was enough, because then he implanted copies of his ideas, like the apple was a set of ideas, and he would plant the ones that I need to perceive into my mind, and I have copies. And that's what I'm perceiving when I perceive an apple. I'm perceiving copies of the ideas in the mind of God. And they're copies that God planted in my mind. But this makes God kind of like Santa Claus, where he has to run around planting all these ideas in everybody's mind all the time. But he did believe that. It was like something that goes just all sort of ongoing. A certain amount God didn't have to do, because he could create natural laws, and then certain things would happen by themselves. But a lot of it does have sort of God as sort of that helicopter parent, that sort of micromanaging your experience. Okay, I wanted to say, first of all, that it's kind of a nice idea. It's kind of nice. So God, everything is just ideas in the mind of God. I would say that that's true. It's another way of putting it. Just like I said, there are many ways I could describe my Baba's teaching, and that would be one, that the universe is ideas in the mind of God. But it's different, because he doesn't plant these in these other minds. There's only one mind for Baba, and that you are, in a sense, one of those ideas in the mind of God, and it's you are part of God having that dream. And we can actually lay that out, and I have, in charts, and show how that can work. But I want to show why Berkeley believed that he had solved the problem of the mind-body problem, because he got rid of the body part of mind-body. There's just minds, all right? It's God's infinite mind, and then there's our imperfect minds, and then we have our copies of his ideas that formed in his thing when he created the world. But this assumes that the mind-body problem is really a problem about a mind and a body. It's not. The real essence of the problem is that you have a two-world view. You've got a real world that you can't perceive, and then the world that you do. And then you have no way to know how they relate. That's the mind-body problem. Well, Berkeley still has that, because the real world of ideas exists in the mind of God. And while he's enthusiastic about his theory that we have these copies, we have no way to know whether how God copied these ideas in our mind. We have no way to compare our ideas to the real original archetypes in the mind of God. And of course, we have no way to know that there are, except his logic that they had to be, because ideas can only be in a mind. But you still have the two-world problem. We are not perceiving the real world directly. We're perceiving copies of archetypes that we do not perceive. So all the skeptical issues just come right back. And that's what I wanted to get at. It's an idea that almost worked, but didn't. And there were a lot of those over the last a couple thousand years. And it's worth pointing out how they don't work, because then you start to see the fact of how big a thing this is, as I said, when I talked about the mind-body problem, and that Baba doesn't have this problem. Baba doesn't have this problem because he doesn't require a second world. He just requires a process that creates the world of experience, and has all the features that we find in our world of experience. So it's a real account, and it doesn't have the skeptical problem because it doesn't postulate that other world. There's just one world. You could say the world is an illusion, but there's only one illusion. All right, that's all I had to say. I wanted to end, though, say a few things about Berkeley. I really liked Berkeley. I thought that he had something of the truth there, but it's not. What makes it all break apart is that he had that Christian conception of plurality, where you have God is something apart from his world that he creates, and also apart from us who he creates, and this can never really work. But but I like the idea of ideas in the mind of God. But I wanted to say that Berkeley was after he wrote these papers, he became a Anglican bishop. The Anglican Church is then it was the Church of England, and when he was, they said that he had a flawless personality. You couldn't find anything bad to say about Berkeley if you met him, and when he died, he was actually revered as an Anglican saint, and there's in a museum, I think in Trinity or Dublin, they have a statue of him, and I include this is his house. He for a while he lived in the United States before it was the United States, before the Revolution. He lived in Rhode Island, and Middleton, Rhode Island, and his house is still there, and it's called Whitehall, and people go and sit and just feel the atmosphere of his presence. I find that just fascinating. It's very rare when a philosopher is also regarded as a saint, although there are others like Augustine, or Augustine of Hippo is also a saint and a philosopher. But this is amazing because it's in kind of modern era, and I just wanted to add that I was always see a lot of philosophers they're wonderful philosophers, but they're awful people. Not immoral, but grumbly. Like Kant was very irritable, and a lot of them were. And Newton was irritable. Maybe you haven't thought of him as a philosopher, but he was a philosopher, and other things. But science hadn't really broken off from philosophy at the time of Newton. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you in part 12. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.